Welcome into another episode of the Musketeer Report podcast. Paul Fritchner, Rick Broering with you as we get caught up on the summer of Xavier basketball. It's been a little bit since Rick and I have done just a regular podcast. Rick, it's good to see you. And today we're joined by a special guest, aren't we?
When I think of the Big East, Paul, which is what we're going to talk about today, I think of the three Fs. Fans, great fans. I think of faith, all the religious institutions. And I think of this man right here, Fanta, baby.
What's up, guys?
John, how are you? It's time to talk some Big East hoops.
Here we go. It's never a bad time to talk Big East basketball. Never.
That's right. Well, we've been doing these like live spaces shows. I call them call-in shows because I don't know how to refer to what that interaction is on spaces when people requesting to talk to you. So I just call it the call-in show like it's old school radio. And one of the things that we keep getting in terms of requests is we talk more about the entire Big East and all the other teams. And I'm like, well, right now, with everyone's got new rosters, we don't know what a lot of these teams look like. They haven't even started workouts. It's very difficult, especially for someone who's been singularly focused on one team, to really talk about the league at whole. I've been following all your write-ups and everyone else's. You know the league unlike anyone else. So that's what we're going to do today, is talk Big East at large. Let me start with one thing, though, because this is a Xavier show. You just recently tweeted this weekend, there are 3 teams in college basketball outside the top 10 entering this season that you're buying more than others. And those 3 teams were Oregon, Texas Tech, and Xavier. What do you like about the Xavier? Where's the enthusiasm coming from regarding the Musketeers?
Well, the first point is Sean Miller's not going to have 2 years in a row where he misses the NCAA tournament. He's not going to have 2 down years in a row. I got to look at the head coach now more than ever, first and foremost with the program, because you're going to have roster turnover. Nobody is not going through some degree of roster turnover, but now it's all amplified because there's money attached to it. There's egos attached to it. The culture of this sport is downright bonkers. So with that in mind, this is where Xavier's in such good hands, because Sean is an elite coach and he is an ultra competitor. Like, he's got the X's and O's, he's got the passion, but the guy is wired to compete. He's embarrassed that he missed the NCAA tournament, okay? Now, he doesn't need to be, but he's got the pieces back to get him there. Zach Fremantle Revenge Tour, it's on. It's here. It's about to begin. Jerome Hunter was on the precipice of something great when Xavier made the Sweet 16. Of course, people are going to wonder what exactly is he going to bring to the table. But again, I'm thinking that those front court pieces come back. They're ready to go. I like the way that Sean has cleaned up in the portal. I really do. I think that Dante Maddox and Ryan Conwell, I really like the additions there. I like Marcus Foster from Furman. That's a guy with NCAA tournament experience who's going to understand what it takes to just be part of a winning locker room because he's done it before. John Hughley, to me, has been an underrated player in general in college basketball. I've had a couple of that guy's games throughout the course of his career, and I like the way he competes. I like how physical he plays. That's going to fit in the Big East. You've got to be physical. Last year, Xavier was soft. They just were. And when you lose your starting front court, that's what's going to happen. I expect an atmosphere of intensity and physicality with this team. And I can tell you right now that at the end of this past season, the Xavier staff was glowing to me on how much they were excited that Davion McKnight would be back for another year. That kid is going to be one of the best guards in the Big East. He's a veteran presence. He understands what Sean's putting down. Now he has the full offseason in which he knows the program. He knows what Miller expects. He knows what it takes to run the team. There's a mix of returning players, a mix of hunger, and a mix of new guys that now want to be part of winning. That makes me say Xavier will be a top 3 team in the Big East.
Oh, perfect. Already telling us where they slot in. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, John, off that point, I saw a little bit ago, CBS Sports College Basketball, they tweeted out an early preseason ranking of the Big East, and I think that's a good jumping off point to talk about the rest of the conference, because they had UConn 1, Xavier 2, and then Creighton 3. Kind of wild seeing Villanova pick 10th, but we can get into that more in a second. You look at that top 3 of the Big East, Creighton, Xavier, UConn. I think in a lot of preseason polls, that's pretty much a consensus right now in the conference. Is that how you see it, those 3 teams?
Well, I think that Marquette is getting disrespected nationally. And I understand that Tyler Kolek and Oso Iguodaro are gone. But Cam Jones can be a Big East Player of the Year. If you told me right now that we'd advance to March and that Cam Jones would win Big East Player of the Year, I wouldn't be surprised one bit because that kid's a bucket. And remember, he's had to share the basketball quite a bit with Tyler Kolek and Oso Iguodaro. So to me, Jones, David Joplin, Ben Gold, who I really like, and then you combine that with what? Chase Ross, right? Zay Lowry, Trey Norman, Sean Jones, don't forget about him. Continuity is rare in college basketball. And somehow at Marquette, Shaka Smart has found it. Now, do I think, that they're going to be a Sweet 16 team this upcoming season? I don't know about that. I would say no. But I think a lot of people, one of my colleagues, I'm not going to name to stir drama, but I saw them say last week that they don't think that they're going to make the NCAA tournament. With all due respect, what are you drinking? They're going to make the NCAA tournament. They're going to be a tournament team. They've got more than enough talent. They have experience. I would not write Marquette off yet in this league. I would not write them off to be a top 3 team in this league. I mean, in Smart's first year at the helm, his team was picked 9th, and they were right in the mix, right? They went on a 7-game winning streak. They were a factor. So I really like Marquette still. I still think they're going to be a very good team. And I think that the team that's got the most upside is going to be St. John's because of the combination of Kadari Richmond and Davon Smith and Aaron Scott and Vince Iwuchukwu combined with what they've got coming back. But I would say right now, UConn, Creighton, Xavier. But Marquette is right there and tracking well. And if somebody said St. John's is going to be third, would I be really that surprised? No, because Seton Hall was for a while in the top 3 in the league this past year with Kadari Richmond. And I'd argue this St. John's team is more talented than that Seton Hall team last year. So, and there's no drop off in coaching. Rick Pitino's the coach at St. John's. Shaheen Holloway's done an unbelievable job at Seton Hall of coaching his teams. But I think that you can't, it's not a clear cut top 3. It is not, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, and that's pretty clear. I mean, just looking at your way too early top 25, I know everybody just released one of those recently. You have 6 Big East teams in there. UConn at number 2, Marquette number 13, Creighton 18, St. John's 19, Xavier 23, Providence 25. So Creighton, St. John, Xavier, Providence all bunched up together in there in that top 25. Your media cohorts agree with you on 4 of those teams. I just saw on Trilly Donovan's Discord, there was someone who posted a graphic that had all the way too early top 25s laid out, and then it had a consensus averaging where all the teams were at in those. And the consensus has UConn at number 4, Creighton at 15, Marquette at 17, Xavier at number 20. The Musketeers were picked as high as 18th on a field of 68's top 25. You just made the case for St. John's a little bit there. Will you make the case for Providence? Why do you have them in as the top 25 when others don't?
Well, because Bryce Hopkins is going to come back here and I think is going to be one of the best players in this league. And I like the fact that they've got backcourt continuity. I still really like Jayden Pierre quite a bit. And I think that Corey Floyd Jr. is a really good competitor, and it's going to help them as well. I like the other additions that they've made. I thought that Bensley Joseph and Wesley Cardette. Cardette was a very underrated transfer portal pickup. That kid's got a lot of upside. He can be a bucket getter for them. Kim English went and addressed perimeter needs. He went and addressed scoring needs, and he got assets through the portal. The biggest question for Providence is the same question that we asked last year. Okay? It's, can a big man transfer handle the transition to the Big East? Josh Oduro answered that question emphatically and was outstanding. I mean, I think he was better than any of us would have expected. Let's be honest. He was a great big and had a terrific year. Can Kreese DeSandico do the same now, transferring from St. Joe's? Providence fans are going to be upset that I'm asking that question, of course, but it is a very real question when you're talking about the Friars, because if Sandico's not stepping up, that front court, it's got its questions. And they're expecting him to come in and play a big role. So I like the Friars enough that I put them there, because Hopkins is back. And it was a bad injury, and maybe he struggles to come back and doesn't have the same spring in his step. But if you guys look at Hopkins, we're not talking about somebody that was, unbelievable athletically. He sort of plays the game at his own pace, goes back to the basket, can go to the rim. That jump shot was getting better under English. He was having a great year up until the point that he got hurt. So I like the Friars enough that I think they're going to be in the equation. They're going to flutter, though. Like, I might change up the rankings, okay? I'm going to change them up. I think they're like a top 30 team. They were 25th in the last one that I did. But I'll tell you this. From 1 to like 12 right now, I think there's a pretty good consensus. I also think the top 10 to 12 teams in the country, guys, are as strong as they've been in this sport in quite a while. But I do think there's not much of a difference between like the 18th best team and the 30th best team. So that's interchangeable, but that's my case for Providence. I think there's enough returning pieces, and I thought they did a nice job of identifying transfer portal help. Cardette was a really good addition. And don't forget about Jabri Abdur-Rahim, another transfer that they brought in who they expect to really help them on the wing.
Yeah, you can shoot it.
John, let me ask you this question. DePaul brings in, I think, 13 new players. You hire Chris Holtman, very familiar face to the Big East, brings LaVall Jordan on staff, everything like that. Yes or no, DePaul finishes higher than 11th in the Big East standings this year?
I'm going to vote yes. I know that the answer to that question is really
Georgetown
hard
fans are pissed right now.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly, Rick. I mean, that's just it, Rick and Paul. When you're saying that, it means that somebody with some name recognition is finishing last. But to me, I actually think there's a theory here. Here's my theory. It's going to be harder for Chris Holtman in year 2 than it is in year 1. And I say that because the launching point provides positivity, provides, oh my gosh, we're competent. We're playing like a team. I mean, this past year, DePaul was the biggest embarrassment I've ever seen them be in the Big East. They were the biggest embarrassment in college basketball among high major programs. They actively quit in games. I have never seen a team actively quit. I had a bunch of their games for FS1. I'll be honest with you. I'm a very passionate guy who can put a positive spin on things, as you both know. I have never looked less forward to calling a team's games than I did with DePaul this past year, because there was nothing positive to talk about. If Jim Spinarkle took a nap when we were working DePaul Villanova together, I wouldn't have blamed him. And then we're expecting people to watch the games. I think that they are going to be better. They can't get any worse. And as a Browns fan, I know what rock bottom looks like. So they're gonna be able to be more competent. They're gonna be better. They're gonna be more athletic. They're gonna be coached better. I thought Holtman assembled a good staff, a coaching staff that I would say is better than other staffs in the Big East. Point blank. He got former head coaches there who are going to be assistants who might not stay with him very long because they get another job, but they're going to be good ads for this year. I think for a launching point, DePaul's going to win. I'm going to say right now that they win 15 games this upcoming year. They probably win 9 or 10 in a weaker non-con, I'm going to say. And I think they get 5 Big East wins, maybe 6 Big East wins. 7 would be a huge step. Jokes aside, if this team could win 7 or 8 Big East games, that'd be better than a lot of what they've gone at. So they're going to be better.
Here's, I think, the bigger point there, John, just to kind of wrap it up on DePaul, is that when you look at the Big East last year and what kind of dragged the Big East down, and you're talking about the quality of games and the quality of wins, you can't have a team like DePaul dragging the rest of the league down. And no matter where they finish, I think the bigger point is just upping the entire quality of the league, right?
Upping the entire quality of the league. upping your metrics in general. I mean, they were losing bye games, multiple bye games, games that you cannot lose. The Big East has done a mostly good job of winning the games they're supposed to since realignment. Whereas if you look at other leagues, there are leagues who have struggled. The ACC has struggled with this at times, and it's hurt their metrics. Not the Big Ten as much, but the Pac-12 had those struggles. The SEC, the bottom of the SEC.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Did we lose John? He was rolling.
No, John.
John from the car cell. Well, we'll pull him back. If he comes back to life here, we'll go back to him. But Paul, just to hit on a couple of points he was making there. The one thing about Providence is it feels like to me everything is so reliant upon Bryce Hopkins being really good next year. Like he has to be their superstar, and him coming off a major knee injury like that, I'm not saying he won't be, but because I think he's really good when he's at his best, but I just don't know that he can get back to his best soon enough for them to be a team that's a top 25 team and finishing in the top half of the league. I think they're a very interesting case. And then the other one was Marquette that we were talking about a little bit there with John. It's like, they lose to NC State in the Sweet 16 last year, obviously, and NC State was a darling of the tournament. They caught fire at the right time. But then since then, you lose, I would say, your two best players off of that team. I mean, we can talk about Cam Jones, and I know John was very passionate about him potentially being a Big East Player of the Year candidate, and he very well may be. But I would still argue those other two players, Tyler Kolek and Oso Ighodaro, were your two most important players last year. Both of them are gone, and you made no transfer portal additions. I know Shaka Smart is very into the culture of a team and the development and all of those things. I think it's going to be an interesting case of an experiment of watching how this team does without going through the transfer portal, really relying on just developing players and keeping the continuity and seeing if there's some magic sauce and just keeping the same group of guys together from year to year.
Well, they didn't have any activity in the portal. They didn't lose anybody to the portal, and they didn't pick anybody up in the portal. I mean, they are completely old school, regular basketball of we're going to roll with the guys we have. And, hey, you know what? If it works out, there was a stat, I don't know where it was, and I've been trying to find it here the last couple of minutes. There was a stat today. So Evan Maya, he's ranked the transfer portal classes. He's done a really good job through his kind of formula that he uses on evanmaya.com. And there was a stat, I think Kevin Sweeney tweeted out, but I can't find it, that 8 of the top 13 transfer portal classes from last year missed the tournament. Something like that. Some number talking about the top tier of the transfer portal classes. And the bigger point there is it's so hard to expect success purely out of the portal. Now, if you're a Xavier fan listening to this, you're going, uh-oh, Paul, what are you talking about? There were a lot of examples of success as well, but I think it just goes to show when you're talking about Marquette that you're relying on that continuity. It'll be like you said, Rick, a really, really good experiment to see, does that pay off for Shaka Smart?
Yeah, and I think everyone is shooting for a blend of that, right? Like we've heard from Sean Miller saying that you have to have a blend of experienced guys coming in and, guys that are already in your program and transfer portal guys, as we welcome John Fanta back into the show. But I think, John, we were just talking about how your comments on Providence, they are really going to be an interesting experiment this year because it feels like Shaka Smart is betting heavily on himself, his staff, and that culture and chemistry of Marquette basketball, which we know he's very into. I mean, if you've been in Marquette's practice gym, it's hilarious. They have papers taped up on the wall that says funny motivational things on them, or they track weird, goofy statistics in practice, like how many times guys have dove on the floor or whatever, all types of stuff. And they are very into that culture and all the motivational words and things like that. He's the right guy to try this type of experiment of just avoiding the transfer portal altogether. No one going in, not taking anything out. They've got 2 top 100 freshmen coming in this year. They've got a 7-foot project that they're going to redshirt. It's going to be fascinating to see how they do.
Yeah, in this era, and by the way, guys, I apologize. My phone overheated.
The takes were too hot.
The takes were too hot.
Yeah, exactly. My takes on DePaul basketball actually caused the phone to break.
Either that or the people in D.C., the Georgetown fans that are high up in D.C., really got to your phone there pretty quickly for what you were saying.
I don't know. They're not really in my mentions. There's something wrongly poetic about me talking up to Paul and my phone breaking.
That's true.
Marquette, I better not do that again. Marquette, yeah, like when everybody zigs, Shaka Smart zags. Now, I am sure that the pain of this past year against NC State is still with them. I mean, they were flat as a pancake in that Sweet 16 loss. But, they pride themselves on player development. Did any of us have Tyler Kolek becoming the point guard that he's become, a potential first-round draft pick? Did any of us have Oso Ighodaro becoming the player that he's become? No. The answer to those questions is no. So Shaka has built a really nice model. I think they've got good NIL money to keep players intact, keep people happy. He's done a marvelous job. I mean, 3 of the best coaches in this league reside in the Midwest. And you could say, well, Smart hasn't gotten back to a Final Four. Yeah, but he's made Marquette more relevant in March than they have been in quite some time. They had never won a Big East tournament until he got there. There's other schools who would kill for a Big East tournament title. I know Xavier. I know Sean Miller wants to have that night. I know Greg McDermott would kill for that night. Shaka Smart's had it before those guys. So between Smart, Greg McDermott, Sean Miller, they've all done a terrific job at those respective schools.
Yeah, I think Shaka Smart is a perfect fit for Marquette. I think Marquette is a perfect fit for him. And I'm rooting for that style that he's using to work. I have no idea if it will. I think it's going to be really difficult to make that work in today's era. One other team I wanted to ask you about, John, well, not just one team, but another team I did want to ask you about is Creighton, because to me, they are scary as hell when you're trying to prepare for this team. I mean, we know what Greg McDermott and his offenses look like and how difficult they are to prepare for, but their guards last year there were games where it felt like if they weren't knocking down the shots at a high clip, that they couldn't create for their own or freestyle as much on their own. They weren't as dynamic on their own. Now, all of a sudden, that's not going to be the case. And I tell you what, Pop Isaacs going into that system, when you look at what Ryan Nembhard did from an improvement standpoint from his first year under Greg McDermott to his second year with him as like a spot-up shooter and the ways they got him involved in the offense and got him points, he became so much more efficient. If Pop Isaacs sees that same type of jump in Greg McDermott's system, he's going to be off the charts in terms of his scoring ability. He's going to be really hard to guard. Plus, he draws fouls, which is something that they never really try to do and something that none of their players did at all last year. They were like literally one of the worst teams in the nation at getting to the free throw line. So Pop Isaacs is going to be a fascinating fit in that offense, I think.
Rick, I think Pop Isaacs might be the most underrated transfer portal pickup in the country. It doesn't feel like enough people are talking about this kid. Now you pair him up with Stephen Ashworth on the perimeter. The possibilities there are limitless. Oh, and Ryan Kalkbrenner is back to, pursue a 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year award. I love their team, and I love the job that McDermott has done. And you're right. Isaacs can freelance. I even think Pop Isaacs, his ability to create off the bounce and do different things offensively, that's going to help Stephen Ashworth free up to score a little bit more as well. Maybe give him some more open looks. It felt like Ashworth was battling it last year, being this manager, getting Shireman and Alexander touches, but also managing, hey, he was a guy who scored the ball at a very high rate at Utah State. So, yeah, Creighton is in another good place. They're going to need their supporting cast to continue to evolve. I think that'll be an interesting piece to the puzzle for them. But overall, they've got 3 players that when they trot out to the court have the experience and the talent edge over yours most nights.
Yeah, no question about that.
John, let's talk about Villanova. What's going on?
Yeah, Villanova is in about as rough of a spot as they could be in right now. I mean, what's going on? I don't know. I don't think any of us know what's going on outside of the fact that the culture that they had, the leadership that they had, everything that they had going for them right now without the Eric Dixon news looks pretty bleak. How are they going to be able to score? Who is stepping up for this team and leading this team? It is a massive unknown. Mark Armstrong's decision, I wish Mark the very best, but I'm not sure if I've ever been more puzzled by a decision to stay in the NBA draft. I'm just going to call it like it is. sometimes you're not an NBA player. He's not an NBA player. And I hope that whatever ends up for him ends up well, but I didn't get that choice. That choice says to me, you're trying to get out. But why wouldn't you transfer somewhere? They're in a very difficult spot, guys. You know, if they lose TJ Bamba, he goes back out west now, and he's not the only one. You know, Justin Moore, those days are over. How are they going to be able to get it done? Now, they're not done here in the portal. Obviously, they're not. They have to fill roster spots. But yeah, they've got to make at least another splash to be able to show that they're good enough. Because right now they are in a tough spot. I mean, I wouldn't pick them higher than 8th in this league right now.
Well, that's just it. I mean, none of us could see them being realistically a top half team, even if they make more additions in the transfer portal. None of us can see them working their way into the top 5 this year, right?
No, because right now I couldn't even name a starting 5 for them.
Right. And that's like to see them in this position right now, given where they were just a few years ago. Like, I think the piling on Kyle Neptune has been too much at times for certain, but we are now in a place where this is going to be really hard to defend and really hard to fix. And it's really sad to see them in this spot all of a sudden so soon. What do you think the admin does there if they are in 8th or 9th or 10th in the conference?
Well, you're going to be forced to make a change. 3 years is fair. It's enough time, especially at a program like Villanova of their stature, that if they're not making the NCAA tournament this year, they're going to have to make a change in leadership, and they're going to have to go outside the family to do it. It's not like there's a candidate that's inside the family that's ready for this job and that can take it on. They're going to have to go after a big name. Now, I would say this. I still think what Jay Wright built Villanova into, the beautiful place that the Pavilion is, Philadelphia, the Big East, the fact they can get to New York City relatively easy, NIL money, it's going to get created back. The energy will be right back to where you had it if Jay Wright's supporting a hire, and if the donors are buying it. I think Villanova is a very desirable job still in this conference. I just think the last 3 years have been as bad as they could have gone. I mean, it's embarrassing, where they are right now. Let's be honest here. I don't know how they're going to be able to function this upcoming season, function well, because again, I don't know where the equation is. Like, you can't get me to say they're a top 6 team in this league because, again, I don't even know who their top 6 players are. Whereas with these other teams, we're able to look at their rotation and say, this is their plan. That's the problem with Villanova right now. They went from having the very best of plans under Jay Wright to appearing to have no real roadmap at all at the moment.
Yeah, and that'd be my biggest concern. Is it's not like they're just missing, or it's like they're floating just below that line you want them at. It's like they seem to be nosediving here all of a sudden, and that's got to be really disheartening if you're a fan of that program right now. John, maybe it's appropriate that we end with the best program in the conference that we haven't even touched on yet, at least the best program of late. Is UConn a clear favorite in the Big East this year and a top 5 team in the country this year based on their roster or based on Danny Hurley's recent track record?
Danny Hurley's recent track record more so than the roster this time around, Rick. I thought that last year was because of both.
Yeah.
But I think now you really hesitate to doubt Danny. Also because he's very powered by doubt. We don't want to be the reason why he's getting fired up and motivated. I don't think any of us want to be the reason, because then you're going to feel the wrath.
Yeah, you'll hear about it.
And you're going to hear about it. So I have them in my top 3 preseason. I'm going to keep them there. Do I think that they're top 3 in talent? No, but I'm betting on them that they'll figure it out. And I'm doing that because I don't think people appreciate how good Hassan Diarra is and how big he was for them this past year. And he's back. Liam McNeely is a 5-star freshman who's going to play like a junior or senior. The news of Alex Caravan's return was the biggest piece of news on draft deadline day because Caravan is a shot maker. He's got great feel on both ends of the floor, high instincts, high IQ, and he's someone who they can rely upon in any catch-and-shoot situation off a screen. Is he a guy who's going to beat you off the dribble and hit fadeaway shots? No, that's not him. But he fits their system to a T. Aiden Mahaney was a great ad. I mean, he was one of the best guards in the country heading into last season. It didn't always go the way he wanted to, but think about what's going to happen now with another offseason here with just learning the UConn system and understanding what they're all about. So they've picked up really nice transfers. Terrace Reed and Samson Johnson are going to serve up, as a good tandem duo in the front court. They've identified the pieces that they need to win, and I expect Jalen Stewart to make a significant leap here this upcoming year. I expect him to take off for them. I expect them to be another formidable team here nationally, because I think there's enough with Caravan now returning and with the transfers that they've been able to pick up. I like their makeup, and I think it's going to translate.
Paul, you got anything else on the Big East side of things here for John?
Well, no, the only team I guess we didn't really talk anything about was Georgetown. I don't know if really there's anything to talk about with Georgetown. I know they're trying to still climb under Ed Cooley, but is there anything there, news or notes that we haven't heard, don't know about, or should look forward to with Georgetown?
Well, I think that for what we hear about the money that they possess versus what you look at with the roster, something's not adding up here. Something is not adding up. Whether it's, just a lack of desire from the high school kid or even the transfer to play at Georgetown, because frankly, their fan base right now is non-existent in attendance at games. But I don't think there was ever a world, guys, where we thought Georgetown would be that bad as they were this past year. So, Paul, to answer your question, there's nothing that I have on the horizon. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it when I say I think that we're all in a wait and see mode with Georgetown to see what they can be able to do. Now, a couple of pieces are back. Others, they said sayonara to, not the worst thing in the world, but by the same token, like, when you look at their offseason, it's not one that's been filled with a bunch of splashes. They're in a state of question right now. I don't think there's any doubting that.
Do you think there's buyer's remorse there on Ed Cooley right now?
I don't think so, Rick, yet. I don't think so. I think that Cooley is having trouble with this new world.
Like everyone. Yeah.
Everyone is, but he's an old school type of guy.
Yep.
He's similar, not in titles, but in mentality to a Jay Wright type of philosophy. And that's why, I think he's got 3 to 5 years left in him as a head coach. Yeah, I don't think he goes much longer.
Oh.
So in that regard, Rick, I think Georgetown fans thought we'd have a 10 to 15 year situation here. I can tell you right now, I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I feel like there are probably other programs out there. We're focused on the Big East, but if you look around the country, there are probably a lot of programs out there that made a hire within the last year or two that all of a sudden realized that the entire game was flipped on its head for some of these coaches, and their recruiting tactics and their roster building tactics just do not work all of a sudden, and that's got to be a hard pill to swallow.
No, and look for, BYU went that angle with their head coaching hire, getting the Suns assistant. It would not surprise me in this new world to see some guys that are in the professional world get some college head coaching jobs, because what they're getting paid to do is to manage rosters and manage money.
Right. All right, John, I have 2 more questions for you real quick, if you have another second here for us.
Of course. I have all the time in the world for you two.
All right. The first is, overall, how concerned are you for the Big East after the news of the NCAA lawsuit settlements in court?
Well, I'm not concerned about basketball. I'm really not, because I do think that these schools are going to be able to find an avenue to make sure that basketball is functioning as the premier sport that it is. I am concerned about the other sports that are not basketball. And whether or not you follow them is your own story. But there are kids, there are coaches, there are a lot of people that work in these Olympic sports who I worry about, because I don't know what the existence of their sport looks like. I think that the biggest thing right now, Rick and Paul, is this. With this $22 million salary cap, for those who are not familiar with it, each school is going to have a roughly $22 million cap that they can use to pay their athletes. under their school umbrella.
Yeah, across all sports.
Across all sports.
Right.
The question's going to be, is Title IX in the equation here or not? If it is in the equation, that's going to lead to a very unique environment among all schools, because a women's basketball player or a field hockey player could be getting the same as a football player or a baseball player. You get my point. If Title IX is not involved, which I will be honest, I think there's probably a world where if I were a betting man, I would say that this does not entail Title IX.
Agreed.
Then the revenue sharing, the way that the sharing is done, is going to be really interesting to see how that gets done and what happens. I think, based on what I hear, you're going to have a situation where this is just the reality. This is from industry experts that I talk to. You're going to have, 17 to $20 million dedicated to football and basketball, right? You're going to give $1 million to your women's basketball or $2 million to your women's basketball and another $1 million to all the other sports. But as you all know, for the Big East, these other sports, the baseball's going to move to 40 scholarships per team. The Big East teams operate with 11.7 scholarships. It's not like budgetarily things are going to change, other than you're allowed to have more. Where's the money coming from? It's not coming from anywhere. There is none. So these schools are going to have some very hard choices to make. When a school is adding a sport or possesses a sport, either it's for meeting a requirement, which that's something like for a conference to function or for you to function in a conference or in Division I, you've got to have a certain number of sports, 13, 14 sports at your school. Is that going to change with this now in place?
It almost have to.
It feels like it has to.
It absolutely has to, but what does that look like? That's why we're probably, I still think a couple of years away from this totally looking like something different. But for it to change, then what's the need for the NCAA? Then outside of a conference championship, what are the needs for a league? Does a Xavier Olympic sports team just travel regionally and their sport gets overseen by that sport itself? I think that's where we might be heading towards, that a U.S. Soccer Federation oversees college soccer. A U.S. softball coaches group oversees softball itself, and so on and so on and so on. Where the NCAA is not going to exist in 5 years. It's probably not going to exist in 3 years. It's going away. And people got to be nimble. They have to adjust. Xavier's got great leadership. And I'm not just saying that tongue-in-cheek. Like Greg Christopher and Susan Lipnicki is SWA. I saw them at the baseball tournament for the Big East, and they said, look, we've got to be swift and we've got to be adapting and aggressive. And they know what makes the money at Xavier. Basketball makes the money. So for a place like Xavier, you're going to be okay. What's going to be really interesting in this is which schools, and therefore which leagues, decide to dance with the devil a little bit and go with private equity money. Now, private equity has multiple sides to it. It, one, can be very lucrative, but two, can cause those people who say they're doing it out of the goodness of their love for an institution that you lose a game, and those people have as much of a say as an athletic director. But one might argue that with the NIL situation right now, see Villanova, that's already happening to a degree. So it is a loaded situation. Not every school is going to be able to use $22 million. Like a Xavier, another Big East school, they're probably going to use, I'm just going to throw it out there, $12 to $13 million. They're not going to use the whole $22 million. This is just another new disadvantage that some schools are going to have. But if you're not willing to accept the realities of the situation, you're not going to be able to function in this world. So I worry about the Olympic sports. I don't worry about basketball and football. I will say this. There are some schools that you do not expect that, based on what I am hearing, will not have a football program in 5 years, because they're going to figure out that the bottom line is so bad that there's never a chance that they're going to be able to beat a Georgia or Alabama or Clemson, and it's no longer a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, I think that's reality. And I think that's really well said, John. Paul, any thoughts to follow up there? I have one more question for John.
No, nothing on that. Go ahead.
All right, John, your career really feels like skyrocketed in the last year plus. I mean, you were already doing really well, but it seems like it's just gone through the roof in terms of your opportunities and everything you've been doing. We see you everywhere. Is there something that you've called within the last year that's been the most fun for you?
Well, a Big East baseball championship game with Paul Frischner is a pretty great career opportunity. No,
Yeah, there it is, John.
Let me think here. Great question. I'll tell you guys this. This kind of embodies. This is a story that maybe somebody out there would be able to use in their life. So, my bosses at Fox a year ago to me said, "Would you be willing to call bowling? Have you ever given thought to calling bowling?" And I'll tell you, Rick and Paul, there are some people out there who have kind of laughed at me for calling bowling, right? I said back to my bosses, absolutely. I've always said to people, say yes to an opportunity. All right. So I got my bowling schedule early in December. So we were into the college basketball season. When I got my schedule, I noticed that some of the dates on it conflicted with basketball, right? And I talked with my boss at Fox. I said, look, I know you've got a need with bowling. You probably have, not probably, you have more college basketball people to call games than you do someone to call bowling that you trust and that you want to. And people would be surprised by the amount of viewership that sport gets. And I said, but I have cut my teeth in college basketball. I love it. I just don't want to, be losing out on a ton of college basketball. How do we? And they said, look, we'll figure it out. They said, we this is where we need you. It's nothing against, it's nothing this, it's nothing that. I think a lot of people in our industry sometimes look at an assignment and they don't look at it the same way. That's never how I've looked at any assignment. I treat every assignment like it's the biggest game in my book because to the person that's watching it, it is. So here's where I'm going with this. I get assigned to Big Fox, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the PBA Players Championship. The very next day, I had Seton Hall and St. John's from the Prudential Center. It was actually the game that Rick Pitino had COVID for, and Seton Hall actually really crushed St. John's that night at the Rock. I do the bowling assignment in sub-zero temperature Wichita, Kansas. I get done with the assignment. It was my Big Fox debut. I was thrilled about it. I was excited. Everything went well. Until 7:30 rolls along, and it says my flight to Newark the next morning is canceled. So now, what is a big metropolitan Big East game on FS1 that's going to get followed by, Providence and Creighton or whoever on FS1 with Jason Benetti and Bill Raftery, and I'm calling a game with Donnie Marshall. Now it looks like I'm not going to be able to make it. I rent a car. Some of this I'm arranging through travel, but the travel people of Fox. Some of it I'm just kind of going rogue because I got to make the assignment. I get in the car. I drive 2.5 hours to Kansas City. I am exhausted. I'm going to get a flight from Kansas City to LaGuardia Airport the next morning. I wake up. I go in the airport. That flight is delayed indefinitely. It's delayed an hour. It's delayed 2 hours. I am sweating and pacing at 8:30, 9 a.m. in Kansas City. Somehow the flight lands. The flight lands at LaGuardia. I look at the board in LaGuardia where it's now snowing. Everything is in red. That flight landed with a green landing. Pick up my bag, get to the, I had to make shoot around. So that day I took an Uber to New Jersey, get to the Prudential Center. Travel's pretty much stopped in the Northeast. Get ready to do that game. Okay. We are 5 minutes to air. I've spent my whole day at the Prudential Center, showered at the Prudential Center, totally disheveled, but we're doing the game. I get a text saying, hey, Tim Brando is stuck in New Orleans. Can you do number 1 UConn and number 16 Creighton tomorrow night in stores? Oh, by the way, you're working with Bill Raftery. Oh, by the way, my wife had a bunch of stuff planned for the next night. Text my wife. I say, hey, I got to do this game. It's not going to work out. You might be in the doghouse for an hour, maybe 2. I go back home to New Jersey after the Seton Hall St. John's game, shower, unpack, repack, get in the car the next morning, drive to Connecticut, do a game with Raft at 7 o'clock. That goes very well. UConn rolls to a win, head back home. That all started with bowling in Wichita that I said yes to and that I wouldn't have changed for the world. Without saying yes to bowling, I don't get an offer to do UConn and Creighton that Wednesday because I'm willing to be a team player. So for me, all of the games are sort of interwoven within each other, guys. But when you get to work a top 20 game with Bill Raftery, you're 1, grateful, but 2, it makes you appreciate the process of when you were doing that Providence, New Hampshire bye game or that Georgetown, Arkansas, Little Rock bye game before Christmas. Just say yes, and maybe it'll lead you to a yes with Bill Raftery just because you called some balls hitting pins on a Monday in negative 10-degree Wichita.
Fanta, are you a good bowler?
I'm a good drinker, but I don't know if I'm a good bowler. I respect the hell out of the bowlers. I can't believe how good they are. It amazes me.
Well, first of all, that was a fantastic story. It's been fun to watch all of your success. It's even more fun because we get to interact with you at Xavier games, and you're willing to do something stupid like this with us and our small site. So thanks for continuing to be the same person that you've always been, and congratulations on all the success.
Thanks for putting up with me in my car. Thank you for having me. This isn't stupid. This is impactful stuff. And the reason why it also isn't stupid is you guys wouldn't do this if there weren't a base for it. I will always come on these shows because this is what the diehards listen to, and there's a lot of them. Xavier has a second to none fan base that is basketball 365 days a year. So I'm glad that you asked me that the 3 of us crazy people are talking hoops in June because there are people out there starving for this content. I'll join you in July or August if you want. I'll come back anytime. Thank you guys for having me.
Fanta, how's home ownership?
Well, I'm looking at the backyard right now, and I got to get the lawnmower out and cut it right now.
Fanta, don't do that. People are going to Google Maps. I've seen this on Google Maps. They can look at a screenshot and find your location exactly. They'll be at your door in 10 minutes. Be careful.
Yeah, I don't want Sean Miller dropping a terrible towel over here. He's not welcome.
Well, he knows where you live, I'm sure, regardless. So you can count on that. Iser will be delivering it, I'm sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Hey, like the Happy Gilmore, I'll see you in the parking lot. I'll see you, Sean, at the dog pound.
That's right. John Fanta, everybody. Thanks, John.
Thank you,
See
guys.
you, John.
All right. Great stuff there. John stayed on longer than we told him we'd keep him, but he's gracious like that and willing to do so. Paul, just wrapping up some final thoughts here from what we hit on with John. Give me your what do you disagree with in terms of looking at the Big East? Are there any takes that you see, any teams that you have sort of ranked differently than him?
No, I would say the only thing was maybe the Marquette thing. I think I can't buy the Marquette model until it works out this year. I'm very interested to see it, but I would probably slot St. John's over Marquette. I would probably pick Marquette 5th right now in the Big East. I would put Xavier, Creighton, UConn, St. John's in that top 4, and then put Marquette maybe 1 below them. I know they have the talent, but when you're losing those guys and trying to replace a guy like Tyler Kolek and replace a guy like Oso Ighodaro, that's so hard to do without bringing in at least one. I'm not saying you have to redo your roster in the portal, but to just completely run it back in today's day and age when you have help available that you're choosing not to use. I'm really interested to see how that works out. That would be my only little thing. Other than that, I mean, nothing else that really sticks out.
I don't know that Marquette does have the talent, and that's what I'm interested to see. Because again, I think those 2 guys were really important. So it's an interesting model that he's using. I think there could be some merit to it. And like I said with John, I think he's the right guy to try this. Him being Shaka Smart, but I don't know that it's going to work, and I don't think I would have them in that top group like you're saying. St. John's to me is going to be a really interesting one too, because they don't have enough shooting. I'm pretty sure that looks pretty clear to me that they're not going to shoot the ball very well. But man, does this roster do a lot of other things for me. I mean, when you're talking about Davon Smith and Kadari Richmond in the same backcourt, and again, I know we're talking about new players all having to come together and figure it all out on the fly. But that's the position most teams, aside from Marquette, are going to be in. So I don't think they're unique in that regard. And if they can make that work with those two players, I mean, the type of defense, type of athleticism the St. John's team is going to have, Rick Pitino will figure out how to make life difficult on other Big East teams with this group of players, I think. So I think St. John's, you could convince me they're like in that top 3. You could also convince me they're down like somewhere 5th, 6th, 7th. And I could argue that you're right, but they're a team that I really have my eye on that I think is going to be interesting. So, I mean, in terms of the way I see it, I think for me, it's UConn, Creighton at number 2. And then I might be willing to go Xavier number 3, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think a Xavier, UConn, Creighton top 3 group with UConn just a step above because of the coaching and the precedent and everything else. I do think roster wise, Alex Caravan coming back is a huge deal. They obviously bring back a lot of talent from last year. Plus you go get Aiden Mahaney, these guys that are going to be new faces. They're not the roster wise. They're not this year's UConn team. They're not what we just saw. That's okay for Danny Hurley and what they've proven and the culture and the precedent that they've set and how talented look at what they did 2 years ago when, Xavier beat them twice and then they go and they win every NCAA tournament. Hold on. I was getting a call. They go and they win every NCAA tournament game by, a record margin. That's just a completely, it's unprecedented. So to doubt them is stupid.
Agreed. And Aiden Mahaney is a guy that John, I think, said it really well about him, that he's kind of flying under the radar a little bit. But 2 years ago, had you added, or, like last offseason, had you added Aiden Mahaney after his freshman year, everyone would have been like, what a magnificent get. He's going to be one of the top guards in all of college basketball. Because that's what they were saying going into last year for St. Mary's. And that's why St. Mary's was ranked so highly coming into the season and ultimately ended up being a disappointment. I would just look at Cam Spencer. No one thought Cam Spencer was going to be what he ended up being for UConn until they saw him there. It was like a nice get, but it was not, he's going to be like the ideal college basketball player until we're midway through Big East play. And everyone's like, damn, this Cam Spencer is incredible. He just does everything perfectly. He's a basketball player, and Danny Hurley can make that work. I think Aiden Mahaney might slot into a similar role. Now, I don't know if he's quite as tough physically, quite as athletic, but he has some tools and some abilities that with Danny Hurley's guidance, I think he could develop into a perfect player within that system, just like Cam Spencer was. And it wouldn't surprise me if they're right back in the top 5 nationwide again. So I will go with them number 1, but I'm on the Creighton bus. I think Creighton's underrated right now.
I do too. I do too.
I could easily make the argument Creighton's number 1 in the conference this year.
I think Creighton's really good. I think McDermott is a fantastic coach. I think the talent they have is great. I love Ryan Kalkbrenner as far as, everything he's done in his career and what he can be now this year with that team. Yeah. Pop Isaacs, Ashworth coming back. Yeah. I think they're really good.
And didn't they end like Jemiah Neal too? Like they added a big time athlete on the wing too, didn't they?
Yeah. I forget who that was. I think you're right.
Yeah. So, I mean, they upgraded the things they needed to upgrade, in my opinion. Not that they didn't lose anything either, but I like this Creighton team. I think they're underrated a bit. All right. Just to wrap this up, Paul, the Sean Miller podcast, no episode today on Monday as we're recording this like you usually do, but you are releasing one later this week, correct?
Yeah, we recorded it yesterday. It'll come out either Wednesday or Thursday, just to finish up editing it here as we get into the week. So just want to make sure we give Josh a little bit of time there to turn that around. Usually he's get pretty good, but he's on vacation, so I don't want to bug him here. He comes back tomorrow and he will turn that around for you. It was funny. He texted me. He lands at 3:00. This is how much of a grinder our guy Josh is. He's been out of town. He's been enjoying. I think he's going to the Reds game tonight. He's out in the Rocky Mountains. And he texted me, he said, hey, I heard you guys recorded yesterday. You need me to turn it around right after I land tomorrow? I said, we'll get it out Wednesday. We'll be good. So yes, it will. It'll be coming out Wednesday. Really good episode, I thought, on just kind of an update of where we are. The team has reported to Xavier. They start their summer workouts today as we talk about this on Monday. So just kind of an update on where they are and all the players being there and some other things there. It was just me, Adam, and Sean. And I thought it was a pretty good, as you always talk about, Rick, where it's just the 3 of us talking ball, one of those types of episodes. So that'll be out whenever we can get it out, probably Wednesday, maybe early Thursday. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. It's some fun things on the horizon this summer, like I keep talking about. But again, it's kids camps the next 3 weeks and some things going on. So just shuffling schedules around. But yeah, anything else on your end?
All right, good. No, we'll keep our eye out for that. Did you see the what ifs thread on the message board? The Xavier what ifs on the Musketeer Report message board?
Are you being
People are going
sarcastic?
through like the ultimate what ifs in Xavier basketball history.
Oh, I started that thread. I didn't know if
that's
you were
right.
asking.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I forgot.
I didn't know if you were like. I didn't know if you were making a.
No, that wasn't a bit. I genuinely forgot
I
that
didn't
you
know
were
if
the one who started it. So
Okay.
did you have one in mind, or did you post one? I can't remember now. What was your ultimate what if for
well,
Xavier
so the
basketball?
original tweet, I forget who the original tweet was from, but I think that the two biggest what ifs for me that I posted in that thread were the Kansas State loss. If they had beaten Kansas State, because they would have played Butler in that next game. And to me, and there was nothing really in that Kansas State game. It's not like the Ohio State game where you think, oh, that was clearly a technical foul that didn't get called, what if like that. I think it really has been fun reading that thread because it's devolved into a lot of things. Also, shout out to our guy Scene Watcher, that we discovered some things about his interviews back when Bob Stack was getting hired at Xavier. So it's become an interesting thread. But yeah, I would say the Greg Oden and the Kansas State game to me are the biggest ones. I mean, you could say the JP foul in 2018, but if you look back at that 2018 region, Rick, when Xavier was a 1 seed, that was a really hard region that Xavier would have had to get through. Like, I don't look at
the second round. It's the second round. So it's like, even if you guarantee they win that game, it's like, you're still only to the Sweet 16.
I look at that 2018, and even when you look back at the 2016, the Wisconsin loss too, it's the round of 32 to get to the Sweet 16. And there were some really, really challenging. I mean, Gonzaga was in that region in 2018, and I know that wasn't the Gonzaga team that they had lost to the year before. They had lost some guys, but like that was not a cakewalk to the Final Four through the 16 and the 8 that maybe some people think it was, just because Xavier was the 1 seed in that region. But outside of that, did you have one that sticks out? Or what if?
I think it's mostly got to be the Elite Eight appearances. I mean, like the Duke game.
Yeah,
their fouls. I mean, I felt like phantom fouls in the end of that Duke game where, and I don't know which specific moment you pick, maybe the fifth foul on Anthony Miles or whatever.
Miles.
Maybe that's the one. But if you could pick something going differently in that Duke game as the what if, so you flip that one, because it's like, man, to just break through would be, so incredible. That's it. Obviously, the Greg Oden moment is because it's such the obvious moment of like, he clearly did shove him into the second row. That clearly is an intentional foul. And if you get a second free throw for Justin Cage, that game is over probably, right? Instead of him missing.
Well, plus you get the ball back with 9.3 to go.
Well, yeah. I mean, exactly.
I mean, it's the whole deal. Like, you're not I mean, it would take so much to lose that game at that point if
it's called.
Well, look, we're just driving the knife deeper in.
Yeah. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think that was.
I thought the thread was great, and I was very interesting reading a lot of those things, because there were a lot of scenarios that I had either forgotten about or maybe didn't even know. But the other thing too from that Ohio State game that I think Sean has talked about on the podcast, I don't remember if he said it on the air or off the air. But just talking about his strategy, I think it was on the air, one of the earlier shows, talking about fouling up three.
Changed him forever.
Yeah, it changed him forever in that situation, that they could have fouled Ohio State, obviously, coming down the court with 9 seconds left. They didn't. Tie the game, goes to overtime. And, Sean's one of those guys where if something goes wrong, you're always going to overcorrect the other way. And that's how he's viewed it. And that's
automatically foul up three now.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, maybe that's the what if too. What if they just fouled, and even if it wasn't called properly, you still probably win that game. So yeah, there were some good moments, obviously some painful moments for Xavier fans, but it was another good thread. So if you're not subscribed to the message board, again, this is where all the Xavier fans, all the biggest Xavier fans are talking about Xavier basketball year round. Make sure you join us. Actually, this week, I think on Wednesday or Thursday it launches, we will have another sale. A big flash sale. So I don't know how big it's going to be discounted, but it's going to be significant. So if you're not signed up currently, the end of this week will be perfect for that. You can join the Xavier community, get in here, and that'll get you through till this time next year. It's actually a good time. Like, people say, oh, this isn't a good time to sign up because you're in the middle of summer, but it actually is a good time to sign up on one of those discounts because it gets you all of next year's transfer portal news.
Yeah.
Right. So like you're not missing out on anything. You get all the way back to this time next year. You get the full season and the transfer portal / recruiting news for next year. So, all right. Anything else, Paul?
That's it, Rick.
All right. Another edition of the Musketeer Report podcast in the books. Thanks for listening, everyone.